So again, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Julia Gavin, coming to you from Nashua, New Hampshire, which is for all of our international friends, say 40 minutes from Boston, a couple hours from New York City. That might give you a reference. And I'm a member of the New Hampshire UXPA Association. This evening, Susan Rice is joining us. Susan is the VP of User Experience from Workiva. Susan, I meant to ask, am I pronouncing that right?
Workiva, it was really close.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Workiva, excellent. And tonight, Susan will be presenting about building the plane while flying, scaling UX within high growth organizations. We've had a lot of interest in this topic, so I'm really looking forward to a great presentation and then a lively conversation with everyone. So this evening, we'll spend a few minutes doing a welcoming, and then who's hiring or who's looking. We have some job postings to share and some events coming up. Susan will have about 45 minutes to an hour to present, and then a good half hour or so for Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then when we get to the either a pausing point for Susan or at the end, however she's most comfortable, I'll read out the questions, and then once we get a good flow, we can also do, if people want to chime in with audio and ask questions directly as well. And then we'll make sure we are done and out by 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so that everyone can get back to what they're doing after this. New Hampshire is UXPA is a very open group, and you never have to be a member to join us for these events. So we just love having everyone join us whenever they can. We also have an active Facebook page. We're on Twitter and a Slack channel. We also have a LinkedIn group that is growing, which is really exciting. I think that's where we're getting a lot of new people. And this is my cat Oz, who likes to join meetings sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So please feel free to join us on any of those channels. And Cal will, yes, Cal is already ahead of me. Thank you, Cal, sharing all the links. With happy faces are your board for this year. Christine, Cal, Julia, myself, and Kyle. So we can all wave, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
I love seeing little waving faces. It makes me so happy. So this group works really hard on bringing all these presentations to you and communicating. And I just love working with these group of people. They're fantastic.
Ditto.
So I will, once Susan starts talking, I'll share the links to all these events in the chat box. It's just a little bit easier than trying to get them out earlier. UXDX EMEA, which is it's bridging product UX design and dev, is coming up on the 6th through 8th. Epic 2021 looked interesting. They talk about ethnography and business, and they have some really interesting speakers coming up this year. So that goes from October 11th to the 15th for the pre-conference sessions, and then the main program is the 18th through the 21st. There, if you want to do some of the tutorials, the registration for that ends October 1st, and then the general registration ends October 8th. Button is a content design conference. It looks really interesting, October 20th through 22nd. Clarity 2021 is all about design systems. There's the conference is the 27th through the 29th, but before that, they will have workshops that are extra for October 25th through 26th. Job opportunities. We try to focus the job opportunities to the New Hampshire area, but more and more I am seeing that these are very remote friendly. Excuse me. So Cardinal Health is a connection that was posted in our Slack channel. So please feel free to follow up on that in the job listings area of the channel. CIT is in Portsmouth. They have two AVP of UX designer and an AVP UX developer coming up. Fidelity continues to have more and more openings coming up. And I know we have a few members who are working there or have good connections there. They have a UX designer, operations strategy, and performance delivery, which really looked interesting. IBM has these listed as Cambridge and Boston preference, but they are opening up a few more remote roles. Oracle is based out of, these ones were based out of Nashua, but they seem more and more remote friendly. And then Zendesk has a few of these are listed for Concord, but they're also listed as remote. So I would say that they're not as location dependent. And is there anyone that would like to share that they are hiring or that they are looking for a job? You can either post in the chat or chime in here. Feel free to always drop your LinkedIn or portfolio or job listings in the chat as well. We do share the chat after the event.
I dropped into the chat. I work at Wayfair in the global experience design discipline that includes research, design, and content strategy. And the team is growing very quickly. Lots of positions posted. So feel free to reach out to me directly if you see anything.
Jeremy says that Omnicell is hiring. Susan says Workiva is. Mita says, Athena. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tana. I'm from Cvent, and I'm the Senior Manager of Content Strategy and UX Writing. And we have openings on my team, any level. And we also have openings for research and product design. We're remote friendly. So if you are remote, come join us. If you are located near an office, come join us when we open back up at some point in the future. And I'll post that in the chat too.
Excellent. Thank you, Tana.
I just hired Jeremy from Omnicell and posted in the chat. Right now, what's listed is for senior UX product designers. We'll be opening up a mid-level product design role, and over the next few months, we'll be doing entry-level roles as well. So if you don't match your level, reach out and connect, and let's just stay in touch for, we're going to have a lot of growth over the next year.
Kevin Love. I just recently started with the company. I put up the notes in the chat. I'll put my LinkedIn out there. Anyway, they've got a strong initiative on CX experience. But they also acknowledge that CX and UX are very similar. So I think that they're probably going to be adding some additional people on in the near future. I'll put my, like I said, I'll put my LinkedIn profile, URL in the chat, and see what happens.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, everyone. If you have more links or anything you want to share, if you think of something later on, again, feel free to drop it in the chat. Thank you, as always, to our sponsors, Market Street Talent. Is Jay here? I don't think he's here today, but I will be connecting with him soon. Market Street Talent is based out of New Hampshire in the Portsmouth area. So if you're local and you're looking to hire or find a new position, they're always very helpful with finding the right person or the right position for you. So feel free to reach out to them, marketstreettalent.com. And thank you again to them for their support. Oh, and Christina has a good question about applications at companies. So if anyone is in a hiring position and feels like putting their thinking cap on, feel free to drop a message in that chat. Thank you, Christina. Okay, at this time, Susan, are you good for going that next couple seconds? Okay. Again, I'd like to introduce Susan Rice, VP of User Experience from Workiva. Susan will be talking about building the plane while flying, scaling UX within high-growth organizations. And Susan has shared her LinkedIn address with us and her Twitter account. So feel free to follow up with her afterwards as well. And Susan, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Let me queue up. Hopefully I can get this going. There we go. Can you see my desktop?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's good.
Okay, awesome. I'm just going to move it just a second there. All right, well, okay, so building the plane while flying. Yeah, I'm sure some of you know what this is about, especially, you know, companies like Wayfair. Christine was talking about how they're growing so fast. I can only imagine, actually, one of you should be having this presentation and running it because there is so much going on so fast. Really high growth company. And so, yeah, I've had a few different experiences with that myself. And so I figured I would share what I've learned. But before I get started, let me give you a little bit of background, which will hopefully help you understand why I've had some of these experiences. But yes, I'm Susan. I consider myself kind of a starter, if you want to say, if you want to label me, as well as a creative problem solver. So I really like to get things going, get excited, figure out how to build, you know, vision strategies, get teams all aligned and getting into the same direction so we can really make an impact. I've been in the UX field for a very long time, something like 20 years or something like that. I've also been building teams and leading teams for 10 something years with 4 pretty fast growing teams. And especially my last 3, which in this one too. So a little bit about those companies. I've been in many different industries, but the last, 5 companies, going from Staples, to Vistaprint, Mindbody, Toast, and then Workiva. The last 3 were, are very fast growing. Actually, Vistaprint was as well in a different kind of capacity, but I really kind of cut my teeth in management and leadership, even more so starting with Mindbody and beyond. Before that, I was in a bunch of startups before they were called startups, many of which have been gobbled up by larger organizations. So that was kind of fun to see along the way. But in any case, let's just talk a little bit about what I mean by building the plane while flying. Not sure if you've all seen this, but we're going to transfer over here and watch this video for just a second.
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
Not the best resolution, but
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high. Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing. You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards, owls. These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
I do a lot of things up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, the look in his eyes, that's all the things I need.
So a little less relevant who was doing that, who shared that, but I love watching that video because it feels like some of the experiences that I've been leading through and leading teams through, where you are just trying to get by. And it feels stressful, lots of anxiety. Let me just give you like a snapshot of what I'm talking about. When I was at Toast, I started with 8 UXers, and within a year and a half grew that to 40 people. So going from 8 to 40, while delivering value, while the rest of the company was growing, they basically doubled in size during that time period. It was just crazy run, don't stop, try to just keep getting ahead. So like I mentioned, probably some of you have experienced that as well, but just curious, like if you want to just chat, like what are some of the challenges that you've had as your companies are trying to either like go through rapid growth or scale? Anybody want to share some stuff? Any big challenges? Oh, totally. Communicating, right? Operations, process. Yes. Hiring, like, yes, let's get more bodies in here as quickly as possible. Oh, you got more bodies in here. Guess what? You actually have to onboard them. So it's actually a lot of work up front before you can actually see that kind of the benefit of hiring a lot more people, the training, right? Stakeholder education, absolutely. All of these things and more. Yes, documentation, right? You're moving too fast to document anything. So just a couple of examples of challenges. You know, you're also feeling like you're not making enough impact because you don't have all the people to be able to actually cover all the work. You might hear this like peanut buttering UX around, right? What about lack of maturity? I'm going to touch a little bit upon that, but way later in the presentation. So not enough time, not enough time, not enough time, a lot of those things. And eventually some of your team members just might feel apathetic to all of the change that's happening all at once. And somebody mentioned this right out of the gate, right? Communication. So, oh my gosh, like how are you able to communicate when your entire company has just doubled in size? It feels like 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, 1 step forward, 3 steps back. Because finally, when you make some traction, then you're like, oh, a new executive has come in, a new leader has come in, a new team members come in, and I got to back up for them over and over and over again. So yes, I feel that pain. But we still can scale, and we still can make progress through those challenges. It's still possible, but it takes work, right? It takes effort for sure. And so, you know, what are those first things that you're thinking about? It actually came up a bunch. It's like, okay, well, let's hire more people. Let's get more people in here because we need more bodies to support all of the work that's handed to us. So the thing about headcount, though, it's not as easy as adding those bodies. You need a broader strategy. And you also really need to take into account the context of your business, the context in terms of what you're driving towards, you know, and really how to make the biggest impact across the board. So that is one tactic. There's a bunch more. So let's see. So what is that actually going to take? Well, let's see here. I got to queue up. Let's see if I can do this at the same time. Yeah. Like turn and face the strange, right? Lots and lots of change, lots of change management. That is what it takes. So as much as I want to keep listening to David Bowie, I'm going to turn him off so you can hear me. But change is the only constant. And that's actually true even if you're not in a high growth, you know, company. It's still like change is what happens every day, all the time within organizations. And if it's not, actually, that'd be a different kind of question and different presentation. But we might as well really take those changes and embrace them as much as we can and help drive and lead through them. So how can we go about doing that in the most effective way? Well, one of the things that I start with teams is Tuckman. Is anyone familiar with Tuckman's model? It's about stages of group development. I actually bring this to my team. You know, every new team I have, I brought that to the team. And I'll tell you why. It's because there's this whole model and it's a pretty consistent pattern of group development. So when you're building a team of any kind, you're going to go through these very common and typical stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing, and then some versions of that talk about adjourning. So when you're actually ready to, you know, like break that team down or create a new team. So thinking about this is like forming, right? First, you've got the team is coming together, and this also includes, by the way, a UX team, if you have a new UX team. So you're coming together as a team, a UX team, or as a squad, whatever that group is, and you're forming that team. And you know, you're getting to know each other. So you're extra nice, you might be extra polite, you're afraid to step on toes. But then at some point you kind of give that up because you're working together day in and day out. And now you're like, okay, well, now here are my true colors. And you know what? I actually like to work this way and you like to work that way. And then becomes like this point in conflict or some friction comes out. And so now you got to storm together to figure out like, what are our modes of operation together so that we can get to this stage of norming where you're actually, you know, people are resolving differences, things, you know, you're starting to respect one another. And ultimately what you're trying to get to is performing as in high performing teams, right? Where you're at that point where it's so fluid that you don't have to ask a lot of questions. You just know like, okay, I'm going to jump in and do this job. I'm going to do that, you know, this role. I'm going to take on that task. And you're really embracing one another's differences as a team. And you're ultimately then driving the results. So one of the ways that we can actually help move teams through that whole process of organizational development is by introducing different frameworks. So frameworks are, right, a structure intended to serve as a support or a guide. So you are working through frameworks all the time. And so I'm just going to talk through, a few different ones. So let's just talk about this one key framework. Anyone familiar with Simon Sinek? If you're not, highly, highly recommend his TED Talk. It's 18 minutes. Start with why. And this is, also known as the golden circle. So really, we often talk about like what we're doing, how we're going to do something. We talk about process. We talk about process a lot. Process, yes, it is important. And in fact, I have a whole section about it that I'll discuss as well. But let's start with purpose. So like, why are we here? Why are we here as a team? Why are we here, within this organization? What is our why? So as a team, we can build a vision that will be a North Star and help you identify how you'll be adding more value to whatever company you're in. And so there's actually activities and workshopping that you can do to help build that team vision. And even though you have a company vision, you still can really benefit from a team vision, from everything from focus and motivation to alignment and then increased productivity. And the thing about all of this is the why. You really want to have something that you can hang your hat on that also inspires the team to want to actually drive towards. And so that becomes our why as a team. So I'll share what our Workiva why is. So Workiva UX. This came together as a workshop that we, my leadership team and I had worked through, as well as inputs from different retros and conversations with the team. So we are creators of experiences and connectors to customers. Our contributions feel like a well choreographed dance. We instill confidence and people value our strategic input. And so while that's like it's our vision statement, it can also be really helpful to have something that is visual as well, so that you can kind of like just lock that visual in. And again, remember that is what we're all driving towards. And so our visual representation is Hamilton. Just thinking about like, what are the things that were important to us in our context and what we're trying to drive towards, both from an organizational perspective and also like what we needed to do as a team to really move our experience vision and our experience, missions forward. It's like, well, we needed to come together as a team, really lock arms. And that's in a number of different ways. So everything from the fact that, when I first started at Workiva, I inherited a team of about 30. By the end of this year, we'll be doubled, so we'll be at 60. So that means that there was a lot of change and a lot of introduction of new people along the way as part of that change. And so we've got the old and the new, and we've got like the reinvention and such a progressive and modern direction that we're trying to take our software, our platform. So we can drive that in a similar way that Hamilton demonstrates how you can reinvent a whole story, a whole point in history. And we can do that with celebrating diversity. And it just kind of upends what the norms were, what those traditions were. And it just reinvents it in a totally different way that helps us feel like we're modern, well orchestrated, and that we're driving change. And so that is what we think about as we're looking at our team vision. And how we want to operate together. So, but your vision only takes you so far. It gets people excited. It gives them some semblance of what we're trying to accomplish together. But at the end of the day, you also need to execute, and you need to do that really well. And so as a team, what do we have from a team strategy? So I'll share our team strategy for 2021. It's really in kind of three key parts: realizing the potential. So creating a path forward to bring out the best in all, partnering for high quality results. And I'll explain why that's important. Scaling for impact. This is a whole topic about scale. So place strategic bets and right size work based on confidence and risk, know when to lead and when to coach. And then expanding our knowledge. building high-performing T-shaped practitioners. Broken comb practitioners didn't sound as good. Invest in personal and career growth. And then while also protecting our amazing company and team culture. So those were all things that we're driving towards. And then we actually have a number of different activities, a number of different, things that we're driving towards within each one of our key points of our strategy. And so we're constantly looking to improve to ultimately drive to those elements. So breaking that down a little bit more, and I'll get back to some of the Workiva examples. What other frameworks, right? So I just talked about vision. I talked about strategy that helps create a lot of alignment. It helps us really focus and, again, keeps us motivated. But there are a ton of other frameworks that become really important when you're, driving through high growth and scale. So a lot of those are aligned, with people, process, tools. God, as early back as, I don't know, I want to say it was like one of my first jobs even. One of my managers or somebody in the leadership team said it all boils down to people, process, and technology. And I was like, huh. And then all along the way in my career, I'm like, yeah, you know what? He wasn't wrong. I'm like, yeah, that's totally true. In this case, I'm going to call it tools, and that's the lightest of the bunch, but I'll get through, each one of these sections. So let's start with people. We want to start with people intentionally because they are the heart of your organization. So if you can't create a team that's happy and healthy, then it's pretty darn hard to do anything else. So start with your people and start with the culture for those people. So as some of you can recognize, this is from Peter Drucker as a quote: culture eats strategy for breakfast and technology for lunch, and then just eats it all. So you got to get that cultural aspect right, which the cultural aspect starts with people. So just some things that I value personally, so one of these things is the sum is greater than all its parts. Hamilton, that is part of what we see with Hamilton, right? You can't have the entire amazing production if you only have one of those actors. Just doesn't happen. Continuous learning, because no one knows it all. We just can't pretend like anyone knows it all. So let's keep learning and let's learn from one another. Like empathy. We got to have empathy as UX practitioners for not just our customers, but also for each other. Respect, because that's kind of the basis for empathy and for continuous learning, for all these other things, for some understanding that the sum is greater than all its parts. Willingness to share, because knowledge is power. And I really want to make sure that we're sharing as much as we possibly can in the most healthy way. And then progress over perfection. And I don't want to forget fun. Honestly, I am driven by fun because that is what motivates me. If you want to know what motivates me, it is just having a good time. And so I don't put that away just because I'm working. I actually just am trying to figure out how do we have for more fun? And ever so often I'll ask my team I don't feel like I've been having a lot of fun recently. So who wants to figure out how we can make more fun, and have more fun? So, but in any case, all of those things require a safe space. You can call that psychologically safe, whatever way you want to, how you want to describe it. But at the end of the day, you need to create a safe space so people know that when you are talking about continuous learning, you're also talking about failure, and that failure is okay. And in fact, we can celebrate that, right? So all of these aspects really require a safe space for people to truly live and feel like, oh, I really can have fun at work. She wasn't kidding. So how do you build that culture that you want? And I know some of this talk is a little more geared towards leadership, but there are also ways to be able to build culture also from being an individual contributor. So don't feel like it's all on leadership to do that. But from a leader perspective, you can involve the team. You can agree on norms, commitments, or a charter. We all should be hire for people that demonstrate your shared values. That's not the same as saying they're a cultural fit. Share articles, podcasts, that's something that anyone can do that align with those values. So you'll see a lot of Brene Brown being shared in our team. Present on relevant topics And then add moments to your day to day. Again, whether that's through Slack posts, celebrations. We have something called Fridays. I love that. Every Friday, they post up just like, how are we going to recognize? What are some ways to recognize somebody for something they've done this week? And so it doesn't always have to be something big. It's just anything. And I started introducing that even with my leadership team. So before we leave, even if we've had hard topics to work through, it's like, okay, last 5 minutes. Okay, what was your success this week? What was your success? Let's make sure we're remembering those, because sometimes it's like almost too easy to remember what's not working, and the next thing you need to work on, and the next problem to solve, and the next problem, right? It's part of our jobs to think that way, but it doesn't mean we always have to live that way. So remember to bring in those celebrations. Also, in terms of scaling your team, is an alignment on skills. So if you're not aligned on skills, all the different craft aspects, or I read this article about human skills instead of soft skills. So, if you're not aligned on what actually matters and what your how you're calibrating across your team on the expectations for skills, then you'll ultimately feel that in throughout the team, in terms of what their results are, in terms of what the quality is, in terms of even some of the friction that will come up because there's the lack of alignment. And every time there's like friction, every time there's somebody who's like not happy because there's like some misleveling conversation, or somebody doesn't feel like, that person should have been promoted, or this person isn't living up to that, that skill set, or whatever that kind of like chatter and all that stuff happens, it just means that you're not at your optimal performance. You're not really at that, high performing team, because we haven't done a great job in making sure that we set those expectations and that we have alignment with our teams around what's expected for level, role, and so forth. So it's to invest in that really ultimately helps us scale faster. So all that being said, how many of you are still feeling like you're catching up to the growth of engineering and or PM? Anyone feel like that? Anyone feel like they're behind in that growth? I'm going to raise my hand. I'm like, yeah, been multiple teams where I felt like that. Awesome, Diana, that you pulled ahead. That's amazing. But yeah, I see some other people saying, yeah, it happens, right? It can totally happen. Either you've come into the organization, it was like that already, or, something's just happened in terms of the ordering of the hiring as you're going through that high growth team, high growth as you're going in a high growth organization, sorry. So yeah, in that case, you're the mayo. I think it's mayo. I don't know. It didn't look like mustard. And the struggle is real. So what do you do? Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about growing the team. Let's talk a little bit about that. And this alone, by the way, there is so much to unpack in terms of growing the team. So essentially that hiring process, thinking about this, it's like, okay, so let's think. Do you have an organizational plan? Do you have alignment for what you need? Are you working with your partners in product management, in engineering, to line all that up and make sure that you've got a path that actually works effectively for all, right? Are you sure you're all aligned on what the outcomes are that you're driving towards, and where there might be some possible friction because the ordering might not be quite right, or maybe there's just a misalignment in terms of where the dollar should be spent. So are you all aligned there? Do you know what it'll take to impact the business? Do you know what you personally will prioritize? Because again, it's not just about any one person. It's not just about like, oh, I need, again, going back to that bodies example, I just need more bodies. It's like, no, you need people that will drive to the results that you're looking for as, again, an organization, as a department, as a team. And so what does that look like for you based on, on your priorities? And do you have those priorities? And again, going back to alignment, do you have alignment on those priorities with the rest of the organization? Oh, somebody said this. It was Erin. Oh, I forgot her last name. I don't know right now. But I was on a panel with somebody at DraftKings, and she made this really great comment about, hey, just because a product manager asks for a rec doesn't necessarily mean that you should just be like immediately, yes, let's hire for that. Just because you're building a squad, and if you think about that as a triad, you want that to be a whole triad, that's awesome. It's an awesome place to start. But think about that critically. It's like, really, do we need that person in that rec, in that role, in that squad? Are there other areas that actually will drive more impact? So look at those things critically. Don't just, take what's coming and negotiate effectively. So then, okay, let's say you've got all that alignment, you figured out the prioritization. Do you have like the career guide? Do you have some kind of leveling? Do you have anything in terms of expectations so that you're identifying the appropriate levels to hire for? Because if you're bringing in somebody who at a lead level, let's say, but actually they seem to be operating more as a senior, and then suddenly you've got these seniors who are operating more like a lead, and you've got this mismatch, and guess what? You just started creating some frustration on your team because of some misleveling. So don't just suddenly like, oh, it's a tough market right now. And people are getting pretty aggressive with the salaries, but that shouldn't be the reason why you hire for a higher level than what somebody is demonstrating they have the experience for. You've got to be careful about that, because ultimately it impacts the greater team, and you got to think of the sum is greater than, its individual parts. So I know, yeah, it's totally true about the salaries. So then you have to think about your culture, go back to your culture. Are you aligned on critical traits for the role? So again, you've got all these interviewers. Do you have an interview plan? Do you have guides? Are you calibrated with them? Do they know what they're looking for? Are they aligned with what you're looking for? Because then you're wasting time, in the process, and you're not moving as quickly as you can, because you get to that point where everyone thinks something different about that candidate. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, we're all looking at them in a completely different way. And we're not calibrated on what it is that we're actually targeting. So in some of these cases, even though it feels really painful because you're building that plane while you're flying, you really do need to take a little bit of time, especially in this hiring process, to make sure you've got things set up, because it'll ultimately save you time in the long run. So it's critical that you hire the right talent. This is not a place to take things lightly, because it can mess up the whole thing, everything, if you don't take this very seriously and you have a plan. So yeah, a little bit more about hiring. Trust me, I get it. Life is crazy in these high growth organizations. And if you don't have all the time, I get it. You're like, I don't have the time. I'm running at high speed. I just really seriously do need some people. Then make sure you're hiring for adaptability. For in high growth organizations where you're looking to scale very quickly, hire for adaptability, because you don't have time otherwise. Because there's going to be so much change, then you need to have people that are not just like willing to work through change, but maybe like enjoy that change and like are really, can get into that. And so think about the types of questions you'll be asking to really understand adaptability during that interview process. And again, if nothing else, read Org Design for Design Orgs. So that gives you some good possible frameworks, more specific frameworks around how to build an organization, what things to consider, a lot of different aspects. So that's great. And then there's a whole series of leveling guides or career guides that are available on progression.fyi. If you're interested in seeing what others, are using, and, beg, borrow, and steal, so that you have something to build off of. But I would definitely, if you have a team right now, don't wait, use those. Also, on the flip side, if you're an individual contributor, it wouldn't hurt it wouldn't hurt to go into progression.fyi to see what other organizations, how they're framing their leveling. Like, what does it mean to be senior at Intercom? Senior designer. What does it mean to be a researcher at, another company? I forget all the different companies there, and there's quite a few at Zendesk, for instance. So, go look at that. And then maybe that will help you, whether you're in the interview process, whether you're working in a small startup and you don't have a great sense of what the expectations should be for you. Like, there's a lot of material out there that can help you in your own role. So check that out. So process, but I feel like I want to ask questions. Anyone have any questions at this point for that last section? Happy to take a question now if that's. Okay, I'm going to move on then, but it gave me a chance to drink water, so that worked. So process. A means to an end, not the end all, with a target of just enough. Oh, I just saw, sorry. I was looking at the chat. Jeremy, do you have a question?
And one of the interesting things, maybe you can speak to this because I think it's an interesting nuance. What I'm finding with the team I have now are well underwater in our, compared to how product and development are staffed. And I'm doing everything I can to advocate for them to partner with product, but say no to a lot. Find out what's most important, focus on that, and say no to everything else. And I'm trying to give them the space to do that. But as UX people who want to do a great job and hate to see subpar work go out the door, they are voluntarily spreading themselves thin in the pursuit of the work. And I'm struggling, honestly, to figure out how I can protect them while still, keeping them empowered and trying to create a more of a self-organizing team.
Yeah. I have noticed that pattern for UXers as well. And it probably goes back to that empathy factor, right? If we're really empathetic human beings and we're wanting to be empathetic, it's just with our coworkers too, which is awesome from that perspective. So it comes from a good place, but in the end, it might not have the best results because then you get into this whole point of burnout. And it's like, well, wait a second, they're doing it to themselves. And even though if I'm saying these things, they're still not necessarily following through with the no or the not now kind of thing, which I try to call it a little bit more not now than no, meaning that if somebody comes to you and asks you for something and it really isn't part of your priorities based on kind of impact or something, it's like, well, you know what, we don't have that, we're all booked up right now. So it's really like, we can't focus on this now, but we can possibly talk about it next quarter. No promises, but a lot of times those things just disappear after you say not now either, anyways. So that's one tactic that I've used for sure. But the other things are there certain, actually, I'm going to get to them too, is there certain tools that you can use or processes that you can use that will benefit all sides. So let me get into this one thing and then I'll see if this helps with what you're describing, because trust me, I've definitely dealt with that and we're dealing with it still now today. So I should mention that, like, just because I'm sharing this and I'm presenting this information, it doesn't mean that I'm not still dealing with a lot of the challenges, right? It's not like we figured all these things out, and I'll even share that here in one of these slides at some point as well. Oops. So let's go through process then. So one of those process aspects is, I'll call it the UX playbook. Whether it's a playbook, but it's your version of your process, and then those methods that follow along with those processes. So ultimately, we all believe, well, at least I hope we all believe in user-centered design and collaboration. So one of the things we look at is we really just love the framing that Jen Cardello has at Fidelity on right problem, right solution, done right. And then just building on that is saying like, hey, how are we understanding humans, not just your customers or users, but humans and what they're trying to accomplish? What are those jobs that are really important that we need to consider, and how we provide solutions? Then, okay, great. So now we've got a good understanding of their motivations and their behaviors and their intent. So now we can really start thinking about like some possible solutions. We can vet those ideas, and we're feeling really good about the fact that we're building the thing, the right thing in the first place. And then at that point, because we've iterated and we've gotten some more feedback from customers at this point or users, then we can make sure that we're building it right. And then we're assessing those and seeing how well they actually are doing in market. Along those lines, at a whole different level, right? Like that's at this higher level view, which is kind of equates to the double diamond in some ways, but at a higher level view of that. Then we get into, oh, okay, agile and dual track and making sure we've got discovery elements and that we've got the right people involved in the right conversations and that we have a whole plan of how we're operating within a squad and how we're working with product management and engineering and all of those things as well, all those teams and all of those considerations as well. And so you've got to really think through like, what does it mean for you and your organization in terms of how you are operating? Well, how is your UX team operating? Where does research come in? How are you working together with engineers? And so whatever you want to call it, I'm just putting all of that bucket into a UX playbook and having the clarity for the teams on what those expectations are. And then there's this whole portion of getting visibility, right? When the team is small, it's really easy to see what's happening. You're in a room, you've got 8 people, they're sharing probably once a week, or maybe twice a week, but either way, you're like, okay, great. I know what's happening. I see the work. I get the full extent of what we're doing end to end. But then as the team starts growing and you're starting to scale more, you have to start introducing more processes as well as possibly more tools when the team grows. So you no longer at some point can see all the work. So that becomes really difficult. But at the same time, it's like this challenge of like trying not to introduce too much overhead for the team. And so you'll see that things kind of keep shifting and changing and you're iterating on those processes so that you ultimately have some combination of meetings, some tools to help you see that, skip levels, some combination of those things. But I'll tell you, this one, I just still can't seem to completely nail that right balance. So if somebody else knows, love to hear that later. So giving visibility. So not only should you be like getting visibility and like having your team understand what's working as well as what, yourself, like what's going on within this like whole body of work, but also as a UX team, we should also be like sharing our visibility to others. So both within the UX team and beyond. So sharing our wins, focusing on impact. So the more you can tie back those wins and the progress that you're making back to the company goals and the OKRs, the better, and making that work visible. So especially for these disciplines that are horizontal. So what I mean by that is it really depends on how you have organized your UX team. Typically with a smaller UX team, you would be more likely to wearing lots of hats and having generalists. But in a team like mine, and actually my last 3 teams, so this team and the last 2, we've really driven for specialization. So meaning that we have researchers that are different than UX designers, whether you call that UX design or product design, in this case, kind of this synonymous, content designers, and then specialists as UI design. And we really think about those as being, okay, the generalists, the UX designers in this case, and specialists are both highly, highly important to drive towards quality and really create those best-in-class experiences. Let's see, I think we have a question. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't see your name. There's nothing to highlight. Did you have a question?
Suzette?
Oh,
Yep.
hi. Yes, this is Suzette. Good day, everybody. I guess everybody might be in a different time zone. I am from the Caribbean, St. Lucia to be more specific. And I realized that the discussion is very centered around user experience design functional teams. So you're talking about the ambit of a functioning team. My dynamics are different. We're from the Caribbean. User experience design functional areas are not they are not even existing yet within companies. So right now you have the standard or the generic HR function, which is responsible for staffers. So I asked a question, well, I posed the statement earlier on. How does the design function, which has a component of talent management and recruitment aspects within itself, how can that occur when you have an HR function within the framework of an organization? So that's just a question. Thank you.
Sorry, can you just repeat that part? So while you have an HR function, how can what improve?
Well, here's the thing, there would be a crossover. Here in my neck of the woods, HR has the responsibility to recruit, to do exactly, to identify and ensure that there is monitoring of progress of performance and so on. But then the discussions here, I'm not saying that it's in silo, but it's made to seem as if within the design team, that in itself occurs. So I am trying to understand, are these companies, is there a hiring function within the design function team, or that is totally disconnected from the company's HR function?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, from a hiring perspective, I think it's pretty typical that you would partner with your recruiter who's usually in an HR team. So we have a recruiter, EB, she's phenomenal. But you know, we partner. We're partners. So we get together, I craft the job description, or my managers craft job description. We work together with comp, we work together with EB. We ultimately make sure we're aligned on what it is that we're targeting and who we're looking for, and what kind of like both the hard skills and then those human skills. Well, she knows the human skills because she's part of the Workiva culture. So, we work together to ultimately identify the candidates and the type of candidates that we're looking for. And then she usually does the sourcing, although I do a lot of sourcing myself as well. But, we'll do that in partnership. And then she does the first screen and all those things. So we partner is how I would describe it. Hopefully that answers your question. So
yes. I just wanted to understand the alignment.
The partnership.
Because that would be, as you said, communication and mindset change are the hardest things when you're trying to change or improve on function. And especially when you're looking now to create a separate division, a separate unit for what is called now design. When that would ordinarily be absorbed within the other various functional areas, whether it's warehousing, inventory, accounts, marketing, so on. Everybody would be in silos.
Yeah.
But now you're going to more or less say, hypothetically, extract all of your designers within those functioning areas and bring them now into a separate function. So yes.
So that can change. That can differ depending on the organization. So we're not a fully centralized design organization, but so we have marketing designers who we partner with as well. So that just is totally, it depends on the org whether or not they're centralizing all of their designers. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. And if you have additional questions, happy to chat more about that.
Not a problem. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I know there was like also a slacks about our messaging about specialization versus generalists. That is a whole debate in itself. So yes. So what I would say is that I just really value this. I value having specialists who have deep expertise because as I think about this, you have your UX designers, they're embedded in these squads. And so if they're going to do research, for instance, what kind of research are they going to do? They're going to do research that actually helps move that squad's goals forward, those OKRs forward. They are going to look at, and think about the research with a particular lens already because they have an area of focus. So who's looking across and thinking about the type of research that will really help us, say, identifying totally new opportunities that actually service multiple teams, or actually recognize that we don't even have that as part of our focus in the first place. That is the type of research we're doing, from a generative perspective, that's cross-cutting. And that's what, the last, teams I've built, that's why there's a separate UX research function. Similar in nature, our content design not only writes in-app copy, but it also writes copy for our help suite, so the support center. And so that takes a whole different level of specialty, and they really partner then with customer support, because we're ultimately looking to drive the same for the same outcomes. And then UI design being the ones that really are looking at the visual aspects, the interaction design and those details to make sure we haven't really, we've thought through all of those elements. And they're also the drivers of our design system as well, but they're not limited to that. They're not just, putting on, paint on the picture. They're also partnering with UX design again to make sure we're thinking through both from a cohesion perspective, consistency perspective, and that those interaction details that not every UX designer is really, super specialized at. So that's part of why I was saying before, it's important for us to use an example like Hamilton to make sure that we're bringing together, again, the sum is greater than all of its parts, because we do have a lot of different parts within our UX team. So just a couple of examples of that scale for impact, one of our team strategies. It becomes important here because, and this is actually might get a little bit to what Jeremy was asking for before, is placing the strategic bets, right? Right sizing work. And also this part, knowing when to lead or when to coach. So as part of scale for impact, we have three areas of focus: centralize, standardize, and then also right sizing those initiatives. So one example of that is our partnership model. So this is something that we do to make sure that we're not trying to peanut butter UX around, that we're not trying to treat every single ask or initiative in the same way. So meaning that for mostly, for our UI designers, our content designers, and our researchers, they're going to take a different approach depending on how impactful this initiative is, and then also that level of effort. There are some exceptions to that, but mostly it's thinking about it from those lens, that lens. So let's say there's a really large strategic initiative. Well, they're going to join right from the start. They might join with the product manager in some cases. They might join with UX designer, but they're going to, start together right at that beginning. And they're probably going to take a high effort approach along the way in that initiative. In other cases, we're going to say like, hey, you know what? Either it's not super high impact. We don't think there's a big risk. So actually, we're going to take an approach of consulting. Whether that means come to the office hours, or if that means like, hey, let's just get together, let's bang this out. Let me look at your research protocol. Okay, let me look at the copy. I'm just gonna take a look and make sure that we're on the same page, because you have some of the specs and stuff that you need. And then we're going to have empower, right? So empower, that could be everything from the design system itself. It's empowering others to take that and run with it. But that requires that we have the documentation for others to do that effectively. So whether that's copy libraries, heuristic evals, we've trained people to do that, some democratization, for instance, which, by the way, don't let anyone fool you into thinking democratization is a dirty word. I know I was even watching a video about that. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's all about if you're being strategic about it and you're focusing on the highest value efforts. So if you create frameworks such as, this partnership model, and you're training the organization on that, not just your own team, but you're training product management as well. It's mostly UX and product management. Then you're already kind of setting the stage for the preemptive, not now, oh, wait a second, empower. Okay, we can do a quick consult. So you're not feeling as bad then that you're not helping solve some of these problems, because you've already set it up for the org to understand that we have to make these trade-off decisions to really make the impact that we need. So you get less kind of either requests, or you get less, I guess, pushback when you do say like, hey, this feels like a consult. Let's just do a quick consult. And you can even create office hours and things like that in advance to help push people to a particular time so that you're protecting your own time and your team's time. Because right now, these days, it's like you're getting slack left and right. You're just like, it's so hard to focus because people are reaching out all over the place. It's like, no, you know what? Train them to a particular time for a particular purpose. And over time, that actually becomes really, really effective. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, Jeremy, but those are some of the tactics that we've been employing. And this is one that we've been, like, this is like 3 companies in, seems to be working pretty well. Oh, and speaking of that, yeah, I did have a slide about this. So time protection, focus on the efforts that drive the most value. Learn how to say no or not now, right? Introduce office hours. So that's what I was talking about. So those office hours can be really helpful, again, so that you can kind of train people and you're not feeling like you're at their beck and call. And that's important, you know, from a time protection purpose as well. And then have your team members like block out time in their calendars because they need flow. There's not one part of my team that does not need flow, and they can't get that done in half-hour increments between meetings. That's just impossible. So you're not going to be scaling effectively, or at least you're just going to need more people, because actually what's happening is that they're just not protecting their time. So something to consider. Yeah, Tracy. I knew I recognized that name.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about office hours and how you structure them, because that's something that I've been considering as well. And the reason I haven't completely introduced it yet is because I'm trying to make sure that the organization does not think of this as solutions on demand, like drive-through design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, we're just introducing them now in this company, but my last 2 companies, we also had office hours. And so I think that the last one we did a couple days a week. That was specific for UX research. Actually, no, content design also had office hours. And UI design had office hours. That's right. All 3 of our teams also had office hours, 3 of our specializations. So with research, I remember they had 2 days in the week. You know, let's say it's a Tuesday, Thursday, when we were physically together, they would sit in a room and they'd have people, they'd tell everyone, they tell the product managers, they tell the UX team, and they'd say like, hey, got an hour here, come pop in. So it was very open to whoever wanted to come in, and there'd be a researcher available to just like, you know, talk through whatever that is. It's like, oh, I need to do this research. I'm not sure kind of what methodology to use. Oh, I've got this, you know, usability test kind of set up, and I just want to have somebody's eyeballs on that, that sort of thing. And so in that hour, the researchers will all sit in the same room anyways, and they would like get stuff done if somebody didn't come in. But honestly, it was so busy. I took a picture at some point and posted it on LinkedIn because it was just like so effective. And we had a lot of product managers coming in to get tips and tricks on how to communicate and how to interview and how to do certain types of have certain types of conversations with customers, which was really beneficial. And so when we first introduced it, I remember, you know, there was some hesitance from the team. And there was some questions about whether it was going to work. But if we'd already introduced this in my previous company, MindBody, so I'm like, well, I mean, I know it has worked, so might as well try. And I kind of take that approach to a lot of things, like, hey, you know what? I mean, like, it's no harm, no foul. Let's try something. Because again, it's that protecting of your time, because people are reaching out and they keep bugging you at your desk. They keep jumping on like, hey, you know, can you take a look at this? And because they feel they're so empathetic, they're like, okay. And then they never get their own work done. So they're okay, well, they're a little hesitant, and then they tried it, and they ended up adding the second day because it was so successful. The big, you know, there's always the learning curve for everyone. The researchers themselves had to iterate and figure out like the times, the days, how they would do that. But the biggest training was really for the researchers to train others to say, like, when they popped by saying like, you know, this is the perfect thing for office hours on Thursday at 12. And so that they felt confident enough that they could can communicate that. That was actually the biggest training, even more so than training the product managers or the UX designers to get to that time. It was more on the researchers to say, let's shift, let's do it here, let's do it there. And to me, it was like, why don't you just try it first? First, ask people if they are willing to go to office hours. And then if they're not, then you can maybe try to find another time to support if you feel like that's the case. But you might as well first ask and then see how many actually will shift to the office hour time, which most of them were willing to do that. So it was great. Did that answer your question?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So UX rituals, this is a fun one. So share outs, critiques, reviews, stand-ups. I made up these numbers, but what works for a team of 10 needs to be revisited for a team of 20. What works for a team of 20 needs to be revisited with a team of 40. What works for a team of 40 needs to be revisited at some point. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what those actual numbers are. I don't remember the exact time, but I just knew that we had to keep changing it up because you're growing fast. There's a lot more people, and those same processes that you're taking just start falling apart. If you just cannot have a big effective critique with 20 people in the room, you know, and you need to start like figuring out how do you make those things smaller, and then you have these smaller critiques, but then how do you get back to the visibility? How does the whole team get the visibility of the total amount of work? So we played with a lot of things like, okay, you know, what you're working on sessions where people are sharing out in 5-minute increments, no questions, no nothing in that session. Afterwards, people can then ask the questions so that then we would have these small critique sessions of 4 to 6 people. And so even now we're still kind of playing around with what's that right model. And so you got to just figure out whatever is going to work for you. And at the end of the day, like, don't stick with something that isn't working. Just keep trying other things. So tools, which is my last section and really short. So tools are meant to simplify our lives, right? Not complexify it. And by the way, I know there's a lot of things happening in the chat. It's way more than I can kind of manage right now, but I'll go back and make sure that I'm catching up. Good night, Ryan. So tools that help us scale. I put these into 2 buckets of cohesion and enablement. You could probably call them different things. But how can we make sure that we're creating cohesive experiences? That's one of actually our experience themes. So I've been sharing more on the internal, you know, team vision and the team strategy, but we also have more external, hey, what's our experience vision? What's our experience mission, and what are our experience strategies? So that I'm not sharing as much of, but you know, cohesion is one of those experience themes for us because we're really trying to figure out, and I think a lot of you are, is we have a lot of decentralized teams, right? Because that's the hot thing to do. Let everybody kind of go at it themselves and work autonomously. And guess what happens? They are like, hey, yeah, so can you fix the experience because it's really discombobulated? And, you know, and it's like, yeah, okay. You know, I can't even tell you when I was interviewing last year, how many companies were telling me the same thing. Which was that story. It's like, oh, we have all these decentralized teams, and now we're recognizing the impact it's had on the experience. And I'm like, yeah. I can only imagine. So what are those tools that can help you not just scale, right, but also can help build some of those really key points that will enable everyone to move forward faster? Design systems is the hot one. I'm not getting into the details of that. There are all kinds of presentations. And in fact, Wayfair has a really awesome one that I saw like at UXPA a couple of years ago, I think, or last year. So design systems, consolidating the tool stack, that's going to actually help you scale and help you move faster and help people onboard faster and help you the adoption of your design system. So we just went through the whole process of that. Now, did I have a perspective on where we're going to land? Yes. Did I just put that out to the whole team? No. because at the end of the day, I'm not in the design tools anymore. And they need to be bought into that because they went through the whole process piloting. Guess what? We didn't have all those adoption issues that I've heard other companies have been having when they switched from Sketch to Figma. There was like, boom, everybody was on Figma, I swear, in days. And we had some people that were so hell-bent on staying in Adobe when we started this process. So that was really, really great. So that goes back to, hey, if you want to scale, sometimes it's like, you know, so first off, bring your team in and helping you make some of those decisions. And then some things that might feel like they're taking a little bit longer, you know what, in the long run, are you getting the outcomes that you want in a faster way? That's, yeah, like look for that, those opportunities. And then collaboration tools, right, help you scale. Enablement, I also put design systems there as well, but also research platforms, training guides, repositories, like all these things can help people onboard faster, that can get to the customer insights faster, all of those. We're still working through a lot of those things at Workiva, but we'll get there. So the whole point of all of that is like, how do we shift our team's mental energy from all of this kind of stuff to focusing on what really matters, customer and business goals, so that we can drive more value faster while we're scaling. Tracy, did you have another question, or is that the same hand?
Oh my goodness, I thought it would go away. No, I
Oh,
don't
I
have
did.
any
Like, I
questions.
wasn't
I'm
sure.
sorry.
I thought it goes away too. That's why I thought I'd ask. Okay, never mind. It's fine. I did think, I thought there was a time thing on that. Anyways, this is my last section. I've only got a few more slides, so plenty of time for more questions. Other considerations, what else? There's so much. So what about the lack of maturity of other teams? Yeah, that's a real thing. That's a real thing. But I'm going to say this thing, and it's going to sound not very satisfying, is before you throw stones, make sure you've got your own house in order. So make sure that you've got all the things that you need to really be showing up as best as possible as a UX team, before you put too much energy into what other teams are not doing well. Assume best intent, and then build a bottoms up and tops down strategy on how to tackle those challenges that are beyond UX, because you know it's a long game. It's not like you can suddenly get to that finish line in days. You can't sprint to the end necessarily, and because you got to look at number one and number two. So you know, that's something that I'm legit been working on for some time in different companies and different organizations. And it's something that thankfully I have great partners to work with, you know, and through that. So I'm happy to take this one kind of offline because there's a lot to unpack there, but I did want to address that that's a real thing. And it's especially when you're in high growth organizations, you're all kind of, their maturity level just kind of keeps up and down. It moves around a lot. And so how, as leaders, how can you work together to define, again, those teams that you want, that you're aspiring to? So the more you can have that kind of leadership at the highest level really locked together and work together effectively, the better it'll be for everyone else. But for those of you not leaders, think about number one and number two and what you can do to help with the bottoms up strategy. And then what about being an individual contributor? I know a lot of this talk was a little bit more bent on leadership. That's just kind of where I'm coming from. But, you know, ask questions. If you don't understand what's going on, you're not sure how things tie to the big picture, you don't know what your why is, ask those questions. Maybe it was just not communicated, you know, or yeah, or maybe it helps somebody else realize that that's an opportunity for them to develop that why. Ask what you can do to help, because this could be an opportunity for you to demonstrate leadership, especially during these big moments of change. I'm going to go back to assume best intent, because it kind of tied to the next one. It's like there are some things that just can't be communicated, you know, whether that's like M&A stuff, HR related stuff, those types of things. So like assume best intent. And then all along the way, I told you I'm motivated by fun. So whatever you do, carve out the time to have fun. Make sure you're remembering to celebrate your successes. And they don't even have to be really big successes. Just that is really like, we spend so much time at work. We might as well be like having a good time and having a good time together. So that's it, except for some more questions. We've got a little bit more time, I think.
That was great. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to take a sip of water while you have a second.
Yeah.
So I think you hit on an answer to Ryan's question a little bit right at the end there. But if you could talk about the values, culture, strategy set up by your direct manager and that broader org, how does all this fit into that collection of things for you?
Values, culture. So when you're saying
talk about the values, culture, and strategy set up by your direct manager and the broader org. How does this effort fit into the broader company?
Okay, yeah. So I would say we have really strong company values is what I would say overall. And the Workiva values are something that we attest to, and we honestly, they are really a big fabric of our company and culture. And that's through a really strong CEO who completely believes in a people first culture. So how does that tie into the company and that strategy and all those, all the other elements that we have within the organization? Our team strategy really does actually tie in because it's tied to what we are also responsible for and what, what's expected of us in terms of us delivering on really great experiences, and that we have that opportunity to make sure that we're building those together as a team. Now, there's a lot of aspects where it's more specific in terms of like how we can show up to become and live up to what the expectation is. And a lot of our strategy is tied to how that piece, how we can get there. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Stu, did you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Stu Smith. I'm in Northern Mass, close to the Nashua center of the UXPA here. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about your ideas of a central team and like how you balance. Do you believe anybody should be in like embedded in product teams or like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a federated model to that system? Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So our UX designers are embedded in squads.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely believe in that.
Good. Okay.
It's critical to the success of the squad. So that is actually raises a really great question, is that while you need to build a team, UX team culture, and make sure that we have something that we can hang on to from a cultural, a functional perspective, it is as critical for us to have a really strong relationship with the squad at the squad level, at various levels. So that shows up in different ways. So the UX designers are embedded in the squads. They work closely and, before they would sit typically pre-remote world, with their squads. In most cases, there was a lot of moving around at some point and then eventually became more remote. But yeah, totally co-located was great. Embedded was great. And then researchers tend to be a lot more paired with product management at different aspects. And then our teams just like work differently, with different people depending on what the needs are for the rest of our specializations.
Awesome. Thanks. If I could get a bonus question, I would say with your design system, is that a centralized model too, or is it more of a federated? So there's a way of governance to get those individual squads contributing? Yeah.
So we're on our next gen design system. So yes, but either way, I think we didn't do the best job with the governance and the contribution model with V1, which is why it's all part of the plan and what we're doing and actively working on right now for V2. Mm-hmm.
Any good lessons learned on that setup? Or thank you. I'll quit asking.
I feel like that's a whole design system talk.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks.
Come back in 6 months and present that. Jeremy asks, as a leader building teams, what authority do you keep for yourself and what do you push down to your teams? If it shifts, what principles do you use to make these decisions?
I missed the what something.
As a leader building teams,
What authority, sorry.
What authority do you keep for yourself, and what do you push down to your teams?
How do I answer this question? Authority.
And Jeremy, if you want to clarify, we have a couple of minutes, just a couple minutes.
Sure. You know, we want to create folks that are empowered and can make their own decisions. Times, you know, when do you step in, or are there decisions that you reserve for yourself, and are there things that maybe you've seen other leaders try to do themselves that you actually prefer to push to other members of your team?
Yeah, so what is that saying? I'm really bad with sayings, but I do try to push down authority. I guess I just don't, the reason why I get caught up with it's the word authority just feels, but anyways, I do try to push down decision making, I guess I will say, to the lowest level that is possible. But what I focus on more are, what are those kind of frameworks, what are those things that help set the team up so that they know where we're heading in the first place. And a lot of how I go about doing that is very collaboratively. So now it doesn't mean it's communal design. I don't believe in communal design, but I want to make sure that people have some ability to have input. So we just went through creating our experience, you know, vision, mission, themes. And I had people of every part of the team contribute in one way or another, but I ultimately created that framework, ultimately you know, presented out how that shows up. But everyone felt like they were a part of it. At least I would hope so.
Oh, great. Diana has a question that I think a lot of people are struggling with. How do you celebrate remotely?
Oh, yeah, I know it's hard, right? So actually, I'll tell you one way that was super effective, although I wish the timing would have been better, but they have these things called snack boxes. And so I actually sent a snack box to everybody in the team, wherever they live. And they ended up being these Korean ones, not just because I'm Korean, although that probably didn't hurt, but I thought the idea of it being international, a little different, was going to be fun. And that, you know, that day we did our half-year look back and celebration, where everyone had one slide, you know, 2 minutes to present something that they were proud of that happened in the first half of the year. Now, I would like us to get to quarterly. It's just been a very busy year. But either way, we did that. They had the snack boxes. Some people ate all their snacks before the day, but it did kind of create this like celebratory situation, not just because of the look back, but also that kind of fun factor. But in next month, we're going to do Drag Queen Bingo. Is going to be one of our remote events. It's a special event that we have as a UX team yearly. This will be my first one, but we'll have hyper local events, and then we will have some remote events. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to do remote because I totally want to go to Drag Queen Bingo.
You are finding a way to celebrate. That's fantastic. I love it. And then Victoria, I think this might be time for the last question. I love the what you're working on session example. Might you have any other advice for collaborating with other UX designers, all mostly working on different projects and individual contributors?
Other examples just for visibility, is that what we're talking about? And
I think so.
Yeah, so it's that combination of what are your, you know, how are you doing critique? How are you doing share outs? Who are you doing share outs with? And then, you know, and what other ways can there be some like visibility for that? One of the other things we do have is a Slack channel with work in progress. You're not allowed to comment on it or anything, not in the channel. It's only for pushing out, and you can get emojis and that sort of thing, reactions. But it's really just to say like, hey, you know what? We want to have this, we want to celebrate the idea that things are in progress and that we're okay with sharing them, whatever, you know, like level of fidelity that they're in. And that also gives some visibility and stuff as well. But we do have different meetings that kind of are tied to areas of focus so we can get updated. But yeah, there's like so many different ways, and you got to kind of iterate and play with what works for you, because at some point it can feel like too much overhead. And so we've been kind of just trying to balance that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kimberly, sneaking in one last question. Do you feel it is possible to achieve UX maturity in a large corporate organization without a senior level UX executive or chief of UX?
I guess when we're saying UX maturity, are you talking about literally the maturity of the UX team? Or are you talking about the organizational readiness for UX?
Readiness.
We're talking about the organizational readiness, like the people who are running the company.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that would be hard. I guess who has a voice? I guess it depends. Like, is regardless of what that senior level is who's having the conversation to be able to like demonstrate the capacity for what UX is capable of. And do you have that in some other level? Do you have that opportunity to be able to like share, communicate, demonstrate strategic impact?
Yeah, we do. We have a large team. There's about 20 of us, but the company is a really large life sciences company. And there's not somebody who's on like the board of directors who seems to care who is like the head of UX. So it's kind of tough because they're kind of like one layer down from like the key decision makers. And I feel like that's might be putting them at in not the best position for being able to drive UX across the company.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that happens often. So I don't know, like the leveling thing, it's unclear to me like what leveling we're talking about, but that does happen often where UX does not necessarily have the same opportunity to weigh in on like what should get done. So, but then I wouldn't say straight out like it's not possible. Because it depends. Do you have like, is there enough influence to like influence those people that are making those decisions? Because that's a possibility too, that you can influence the decision makers. You don't necessarily have to have somebody at that same level to influence the direction.
And I hate to cut you off, but I just want to acknowledge that it is 8 o'clock. And I just put up a slide with our next couple meetings. So please take a look if you would like to join us for future meetings as well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's a great conversation to pick up in some of the groups. I know a lot of people will have some very complex thoughts on UX maturity and what it takes to get there.
Yeah, and I purposely did not put in some UX maturity models in here, but I use them a lot.
We still snuck it in on you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn and we can continue the conversation in other capacities.
Thank you so much, Susan.
And thanks everyone for joining.
Yes. And keep an eye out for the recording, and you can all go back and see what Susan has shared with us and her excellent answers to all of your questions. And we look forward to seeing you again next month for Susan Mercer on writing effective research reports.
Oh, it's a Susan's.
Yeah. Yes. Susan's, lots of Susan's. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Susan.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.